Hi everyone, and welcome to today's daily revision booster. Remember, this is going to be taking you through some of those topics that are going to come up on those assessments. First thing, as always, is our daily formula, and today's formula is for weight. Now, do remember weight is a force, therefore it is measured in the units of newtons, and to calculate the weight, all we do is mass in kilograms times the gravitational field strength in newtons per kilogram. So mass, check it's in kilograms, and then multiply by the gravitational field strength, which if we're on Earth is 10. In today's biology blast, we're going to be having a look at those genetic crosses and how to draw those genetic cross diagrams. So this is in the B5 topic, so on the second biology paper. First point that we need to remember is that when we're talking about genetics, then we have two copies of every gene. One came from the mother and the other came from the father. And those genes can either be the same as one another or they could be different. We use this word allele, which refers to different forms of a gene. So you have a gene for eye colour, and then the different colours, so blue eyes, brown eyes, green eyes, etc., those are the alleles, the different forms of that gene. And what we actually find is when we're considering inheritance, then it's not quite as simple as you've got either this or this because of what you have in one gene. Usually the phenotypes are caused by multiple genes having an influence rather than just a single one. There are two phrases we need to know here. Dominant allele, this is the one that we show by a capital letter in our diagrams, and a dominant allele will show that trait even if there is only a single one of them present. It's the, if you like, stronger of the two genes. It's going to overpower the other one. The recessive allele, this is a characteristic that's only going to be expressed if both of the alleles are recessive, and we use a lowercase letter to represent that. Four more terms we need to know before we can delve into our diagrams. Genotype, this is the combination of alleles present in an organism. So if they ask you what is the genotype for someone, then they're looking for two letters, either two capitals, two lowercase, or one capital, one lowercase letter. That's the genotype. If something is homozygous dominant, then what we have here is a word we can work out the meaning of. So homo just means same, and zygous is to do with the genes. So same genes and they're dominant. So that tells us we've got two copies of the same dominant allele. So they both be capital letters. If something is homozygous recessive, then that means we've got two copies of the same recessive allele. So it would be two lowercase letters. And then finally, if we've got heterozygous, hetero meaning different, then we have one capital and one lowercase, one dominant, one recessive. So homo, same, hetero, different. This is our 6-step guide to getting maximum marks on any question where it asks you to draw a genetic cross diagram. Step 1, we state the phenotype of both parents. So the phenotype is the characteristic they show. Step 2, state the genotype of both parents. So write down the alleles that those would have. Step 3, split those into the individual gametes. Step 4, we draw our Punnett square out, filling in the blanks. And then we're also going to get to step 5, where we state the phenotype for each offspring. And step 6, we finally state the percentage or the ratio for each genotype present. So let's look at this in practice. Here's our question. Work out the genetic cross for a mother who is homozygous recessive for blue eyes and a father who is homozygous dominant with brown eyes. So we know we've got homozygous recessive for blue, and we've got homozygous dominant for brown. So from that, we know that brown is our dominant trait. So brown is dominant, blue is recessive. So there's just your little note there. What we're going to do then is we're going to draw out our little Punnett square. So our Punnett square, if you remember, is this window with the extension out the side. So we're going to put the mother across the top and the father we're going to have on the side. So first thing we need to do is if they're homozygous recessive for blue eyes, so the mother is homozygous recessive for blue eyes, that means she has blue eyes, and if she's homozygous recessive, it's going to be both lowercase b's because it's recessive, homo, same. The father is homozygous dominant with brown eyes, so he's got brown eyes, and homo, the same, both capitals. We can then split those into our individual gametes. So I'm going to use different colours just to make it a little bit easier to see what we're doing. Now, because they're gametes, if we're doing this properly, they should go into a circle as well. So there we go, that's our setup. Then all we do, starting with the one on the left hand side for the father, we put that into 2 squares to the right. We do the same for the other gamete for the father there. Oops. So we've got our green bees. Then for the mother, all we do is we fill it out with whatever is at the top of the column, we put in the 2 beneath. So just put those lowercase b's in each of those. There are genotypes for the offspring. We then need to write in the phenotypes. Because we've got a capital B in the top left box, that means it must be the dominant, which is brown. This one also has a capital, so brown, brown, and brown. So in this case, it is 100% brown eyes. The only way we could have blue eyes was if there was a box with 2 lowercase b's. And that's all you need to do. So even when they don't tell you in the question what it is, read it. If it says homozygous, we know it's going to be either 2 capitals or 2 lowercase. And you know whether it's capitals or lowercase based on if it's recessive or dominant. So you should be able to work that out from the question, and you will get maximum marks for doing that. The last part they can ask us about to do with this topic is about how sex is determined. And it all comes down to the X and Y chromosomes. So males will have 1 X and 1 Y chromosome, and females will have 2 X chromosomes. So just make sure that if they ask you what chromosomes are present in a male, don't just write Y, make sure you put X and Y. If it's females, put the 2 X's, don't just write a single X. Okay, so make sure you put both of the chromosomes in both cases. Quick reminder of today's daily formula then. Weight in newtons is the mass in kilograms times gravitational field strength. Today's chemistry check is all about alkenes. We looked at alkanes last week, it's alkenes this week. So alkenes are still hydrocarbons, which means they're made of hydrogen and carbon only, and they form a homologous series. And the key feature about our alkenes is they are unsaturated. This means they contain at least 1 double bond. So something that is unsaturated has at least 1 double bond present. If it's saturated, it's only single bonds. When we're considering our alkenes, the general formula we need to remember is this one, CnH2n. From that, we can then work out the formula for any alkene. So if they said, what is the formula for an alkene with 40 carbon atoms? Then all we do is C40, because we just changed the N for 40. And then our hydrogen is 2N, so 2 times 40 is 80. Job done. So learn the general formula there. Oh, I didn't mean to draw through it, so let's just rub that out so you can see it. So CnH2n, make sure you memorize that general formula. When it comes to the displayed formula for the alkenes, the key thing we're looking for is this. Every alkene will have a double bond present. One of the typical questions they will give you is one of the multiple choices where they give you 4 different compounds, A to D, and they will ask you which one's an alkene. So 2 things to look for. First of all, one with a double bond. Secondly, make sure it only has carbons and hydrogens in there. If it has anything else, it can't be an alkene. If you're asked to draw an alkene as a displayed formula, just as with the alkanes, start with the carbon backbone. So let's draw ethene in this case. So ethene is C2H4. So we start off with our 2 carbons and the double bond goes between them. Then carbon can make 4 bonds, remember, 2 are from the double bond, which means we then just have 2 other lines coming off, each one with a hydrogen attached. In terms of the reactions of our alkenes, they can undergo combustion, and it's exactly the same as the alkanes. Complete carbon dioxide and water. Incomplete carbon, carbon monoxide and water. So make sure you learn those reactions. If they ask you what is the functional group for an alkene, it is the carbon double bond carbon. So the functional group is the thing that gives it its characteristics. So alkenes, C double bond C. Because they've got this double bonded carbon area, then that means we can have a reaction called an addition reaction. And as the name suggests, addition reactions are where we basically add more than one molecule together. So we're literally sticking them onto each other. And this is where we get our addition polymers, something that we looked at in another part of C6. What we're going to do here is we start off with the monomers, the individual units. They then join together to make the addition polymer. Which leads us to how we can test for, do we have an alkane or do we have an alkene? Quite simply, we use bromine water. So if they ask you how you can tell the difference between an alkane or an alkene, or how to test for it, then we use bromine water. We add a couple of drops to a test tube containing our solution, give it a little shake. If we see a colour change from the orange-brown to colourless, then we have an alkene. If it stays orange-brown, it's an alkane. The reason for this is we're actually going to see an addition reaction between the bromine water and the alkene. Because we've got that double bond, then what we see happening is this. So we start off with our alkene. There it is, there's our ethene. And we've got our bromine. And remember, it's a halogen, it's diatomic, goes around in a pair. What's going to happen then is that double bond gets broken to make a single bond, which means our carbon atoms then will still have those hydrogens as before, so exactly the same there, but we then have an additional bond which is filled by the bromine. So our formula then is going to be C2H4Br2, because we're literally adding it together. We can also see alkenes undergoing an addition reaction with hydrogen just to make an alkane, because if we're starting off with our alkene, we'll just use the same as before, and we're going to add hydrogen, and remember hydrogen is H2, then all we see happening is the double bond breaks and those 2 hydrogens will join on to the carbons, and we've gone from C2H4 plus H2 to make C2H6. We've just added on the hydrogens to change it from an alkene to an alkane. Quick reminder of our daily formula: weight in newtons is the mass in kilograms times our gravitational field strength, which on Earth is 10. Today's physics prep, we're going to have a look at Newton's third law. Newton's third law is the one we are probably most familiar with, that for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. This just tells us that forces occur in pairs, which we refer to as an interaction pair. And within that interaction pair, each force will act on a different object. So in the picture in the bottom left, we can see we have a force exerted on the Earth by the apple, and we have a force exerted by the Earth on the apple. So we've got those 2 different forces, one exerted on the apple, one exerted on the Earth. The forces are going to be the same size because it's equal, and they're going to be in opposite directions because it's an opposite reaction. So we can see in our interaction pair, the forces act on a different object, they're the same size, and they act in opposite directions, because for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. We've got two types of forces we need to know about. Non-contact forces, first of all. As the name suggests, these are the ones where the objects don't need to actually be in contact with one another for them to act. So we're pretty much bringing the object into a field and then it experiences a force as a result. They don't actually physically have to touch one another. 3 examples to remember: electrostatics, magnetism, and gravity. When we are thinking about our forces, we need to remember these are vectors. So go back to some of our earlier work on scalars and vectors. Vectors are something that have both a magnitude or a size and a direction. Forces are vectors, they have both size and direction. When we're drawing them on a diagram, we use an arrow. Again, the key word there is arrow, folks. So when you're drawing it, if we've got our football, you wouldn't just draw a line. That tells us nothing because it could be acting either up or down. We must include the arrowhead to show the direction it is acting in. So do make sure that you include the arrowheads when drawing any forces on a diagram. The other type of force are the contact forces, and these, as the name suggests, are forces that will only act when objects are in contact with one another. And the contact force arrows we draw from the point of contact, not the centre as we did with the non-contact forces. Hopefully you found that useful, and don't forget to join us again tomorrow for another one of our daily boosters.